Take Me to the Stars, Chapter 3, Frida Kahlo. Isaac is totally owning this fuck buddies thing, or friends with benefits thing. Whatever. They mean the same thing as far as Isaac's concerned, but the term friends with benefits makes him cringe a little bit, considering he's not actually friends with Evan. But then again, they're not exactly buddies either, so... acquaintance fuckers? Oh no, that sounds like an insult. It doesn't even make sense thinking back on it. Enemies with benefits? Isaac supposes that makes more sense, but after all the fucking they've done, enemies just doesn't feel right anymore. To be fair, it never really felt right before, but Isaac's aware that sometimes, maybe, not always, but there are instances in which he can maybe be a tiny bit, almost like a 1/20th bit dramatic or whatever. Well, in any case, whatever they're doing, this no strings attached situation they've got going on is by far probably the best idea Isaac's had in a very long time. And yes, he's aware that it was technically Evan's idea, but Isaac wrote the entire list of rules with absolutely no help from him, so he's going to go ahead and take credit for it. The first time after the fact was a little weird, Isaac will admit. He'd rewritten the rules on another piece of paper and had shoved them at Evan's chest, said, "Keep them somewhere where no one can find them." And Evan looked way too amused for Isaac to be comfortable. Evan had said something like, "I didn't actually think you'd do this." And Isaac had scoffed at him and watched Evan walk towards his desk drawer and slip the notebook paper inside, which Isaac had argued was not a safe place to keep them, to which Evan assured him that Yusuf and Elias did not care about the shit he had in that drawer. Isaac wanted to keep arguing because apparently that's just his nature, but instead Evan had walked over to him and started kissing at his neck and then at his jaw. And Isaac kind of lost his train of thought for a moment until he found it again and scowled at Evan and demanded he put the rules somewhere else. Evan had sighed deeply and detached his lips from Isaac's neck, which Isaac will immediately regret it if he's going to be completely frank, and walked back towards his desk, pulled the rules from his drawer and walked over to his closet. Evan then proceeded to move some things around in there, and Isaac couldn't really tell where exactly he'd hidden the rules. When Isaac pointed this out, Evan had raised an eyebrow at him and asked, "Isn't that kind of the point?" Which was a point well made, but Isaac was annoyed by the reply anyway, and he bitched about it for a minute or two, and then Evan bitched back a little bit, and then they ended up fucking against the open closet door, both thoroughly annoyed with the other. So, weird, but ultimately a success. After that, it got a little easier. Their text conversation as it stands looks like this on Isaac's phone. "Evan, come over." "Isaac, are you busy?" "Evan, on my way." "Evan, boys are gone." "Isaac, I was with the girls for a couple of hours." "Evan, we'll have to be quick, but I got the house to myself." And so on and so forth. On days where they have to be quick, which Isaac thinks is a very risky endeavor, but apparently their dicks don't really give a damn, they mostly only get to strip down to their boxers, and Isaac will straddle Evan's lap and they'll grind against each other. Evan's hands on Isaac's ass, pulling him closer and faster, and it really is quick, sloppy even, and very dirty, and he means that literally, as they end up coming in their underwear, which is just such a bad idea, but they end up doing the same thing the next time, and the next time. Because apparently they don't really care for learning their lesson, but it's satisfactory anyway, and they manage to go their separate ways afterwards without complaint. It's mostly dumb luck that they haven't been caught yet by any of their friends, because they've been doing this for 2 weeks and every other day basically, and no one's really noticed. Isaac thinks it's because they just wouldn't believe they'd be doing any normal things together, like maybe hanging out or watching a movie or other things friends do, whatever, much less sleeping with each other. Isaac thinks it's both wishful and blissful ignorance, which is fine if it keeps them off the scent. So it's been 2 weeks and it's really fucking good, Isaac won't lie. He hadn't realized how much he missed having sex on the regular until now, when he's allowed to, and he's allowed to enjoy it without worrying about it turning into anything more. They mostly communicate while they're having sex, and even then, they're mostly moaning each other's name or demanding something of each other, which, well, It's pretty normal. It's not like they're gonna be talking about what they had for lunch with their dicks up each other's asses or down each other's throats or whatever. Things are good. They haven't been broken a single rule. They don't even technically say goodbye to each other when they're done. Just clean up and offer a half-hearted wave when they make their way out. And Isaac goes on about his day, the same way he's sure Evan does. He was right to trust Jonas about this. If you do it right, then things don't have to get complicated. Which is good, because not only does Isaac not want them to get complicated, he doesn't even think he has the time for them to get complicated. In between all the fucking they're doing, Isaac still has classes, he still has work, he still has to hang out with the boys to put up a normal front, he still has the damn paper he hasn't been able to start, and maybe this is why he's so addicted to the sex. Because it helps him forget just how stressful his life actually is. And for about an hour, or however long they can stretch the activity, to be honest, they try their best to make it last as long as possible when they have the time. But there's only so much they can do when it's really good and they're both horny men. He gets to forget about all of it. Every single thing. It's different somehow than getting high. When he gets high, he still feels the walls around him. They're lighter, easier to break through, but they're never really gone. They're never really forgotten. For a second he's there, and for another he's not, and it comes and goes. It's never permanent, never consistent. He still enjoys it, of course, and when he doesn't have the time to have sex with Evan, it's his best option. But it's nothing compared to be able to forget completely. Forget that he has walls at all. Enjoy Evan's touch all over his body like there's absolutely nothing to break through. The only problem nowadays is that he's constantly thinking about it, which wouldn't be a problem if he didn't have a penis, of course, that is very eager to perk up at any moment Isaac remembers Evan's lips around him, or the way he'll aggressively turn Isaac around or his face when he rides Isaac. His memory isn't exactly his friend right now, considering it's not really listening to Isaac when he begs it to keep all Evan-related material in the bag until he can get in the shower or his bed at night, at least, but it's not really listening. Isaac knows that memories don't exactly work like filing cabinets, but man, would it be really fucking helpful these days? So on the walk back to his apartment, from both work and school, he has to constantly think about things he hates, which are a lot, thankfully, or that's maybe worrisome, but in any case, they also serve to put him in a bad mood, which is never a good thing for Eva, who just looks at him like he's officially lost it every time he slams the front door shut after fighting with the doorknob and makes a beeline for the bathroom. She's also been pointing out that Isaac's been far more eager to take showers nowadays, but Isaac just mutters something about better hair care and letting him live and improve his lifestyle ever. Today's no exception, which marks week 3 of whatever he and Evan are doing, and he's thinking back to 2 days ago when Evan decided to try his luck with his tongue elsewhere this time, and it settled very well with Isaac, to say the least. It's getting more and more impossible to avoid the memories, so he's thinking maybe they should cut down on how often a week they see each other, because 1, too much stimulation is a bad thing, no matter which way you look at it, and 2, he can't keep running to the bathroom at work and doing breathing exercises whenever he gets a boner anymore. He just can't. Eskelet asked him on Saturday if he had a bladder infection, to which Isaac had weakly replied, I don't know, maybe. He's going to mention it to Evan next time, if he can get a word in during the main event, that is. Isaac walks up the stairs and down the hallway to his apartment door, and he's not even dreading the battle with the doorknob this time. He's far too tired to glare at it, so he allows it to fight him for a full 3 minutes before his back hits the wall inside, and he shuts the door, loud enough to convey his annoyance, but not too loud as to convey anger, because he's not at that point yet, today, right now. He probably will be after furiously masturbating in the shower, though. He doesn't have time to walk straight to the bathroom this time, though. When he's inside, he immediately hears laughter in the kitchen, but it's not only Eva's. It's mixed with someone else's, someone's laughs he's never heard before, and it's so prominently different that Isaac's sure the person is a stranger to him. Narrowing his eyes, he makes his way slowly towards the kitchen, as if not to spook Eva like one would a wild animal, and when he's finally at the open door frame, he finds none other than the infamous Nora, whom he's only known in pictures up until now, laughing with Eva as she peels some potatoes on their cutting board. Eva's talking about a movie or a television show or something They'd watched together that referenced potatoes when Isaac clears his throat to get their attention. They both look over at him, and where Eva's eyes widen with something akin to panic, Nora smiles and raises her eyebrows. "Hi," she greets, putting the peeler down and wiping her hands on her jeans. "You must be Isaac." She walks over to him and extends a hand, which Isaac takes cautiously. "I'm Nora." Isaac doesn't know if telling her he's well aware of who she is would benefit Eva in any way, so he plays it safe, pretends he's never seen Eva stalk her Facebook. "Nice to meet you," he clears his throat, while taking his hand back. "Sorry, I just didn't expect Eva to have anyone over." Nora looks back at Eva, who clears her throat and shrugs. "I thought you'd be working," she admits. And she sounds a little defensive, though that might only be to Isaac's ears, considering how long they've known each other. Isaac narrows his eyes almost imperceptibly at her, but she doesn't seem too affected by it. "In fact, why aren't you at work right now?" A switch shifts with Sarah, he explains, not looking away from her. "She needed Wednesday off." "Eva not school," she blinks at him. "Well, Nora pipes up. "I'm teaching Eva how to cook," she says, gesturing towards the half-peeled potatoes. Isaac's eyebrows rise in surprise. "I'm sorry." Eva looks like she's trying very hard to fight back a blush by holding her breath, which Isaac wants to make fun of her for, but he's also not a complete dick. "Yeah, she mentioned how you both weren't very good cooks, so you mostly relied on TV dinners and fast food, so I offered to teach her some neat tricks," she explains. Isaac purses his lips in an attempt not to laugh. "Oh, Eva doesn't know how to cook?" He looks over at Eva, who's currently glaring daggers at Isaac. "I mean, of course Eva doesn't know how to cook. She's the worst cook in the world. She's burnt water before, did you know? Just useless in the kitchen," Isaac snorts, gesturing dramatically with his hands. "Doesn't even know how to work the toaster, that one." "Okay," Eva interrupts loudly, shaking her head at him. "I think she gets the point, Isaac." "I just want her to know what she's dealing with, Eva," he blinks innocently at his friend. "You have to know exactly what you're jumping into when you're teaching a student who's absolutely clueless about a subject. I should know. I teach clueless children all the time at the museum." "Well, she's been doing a great job so far," Eva says pointedly. "So, if you'd let me concentrate, would you like to join us, Isaac?" Nora asks kindly, and both he and Eva look over to Nora in surprise. "I think it might benefit you both if you learned how to cook. You might even be able to take turns." Isaac and Eva share an amused glance before they both turn back to Nora. "That's very kind of you, Nora, but I know how to cook," he lies, and Nora's brows furrow. "Okay," she replies slowly. "Then why haven't you cooked before?" Eva's waving her hands desperately behind Nora in a gesture Isaac is taking to mean abort, but Isaac's really not sure how to backtrack from this one. How does make an aborted noise with the back of his throat? Then he clears it, buying himself some time. It turns out to not matter, however, because Eva speaks up for him when it's looking like he's not going to say anything soon. "He's just lazy," she replies, and Nora turns to look back at him. "And busy," Isaac snaps a little in reply, narrowing his eyes at her. Eva narrows them right back. "I'm always working or at school or..." He stops himself before he says, "Fucking the guy I really dislike outside of his physical appearance, because then that'll be a whole thing, and then Isaac won't have the upper hand in the situation, which is mostly, what the fuck is Eva doing still flirting with a straight girl with a boyfriend? Both of those places. And working on homework. It's a matter of time." Isaac turns to look back at Nora, "which is why Eva assumes I don't know how to cook." Nora nods her head as if she understands, but Eva smirks behind her. "You should cook for us sometime, Isaac." When Nora turns to look back at Eva, her smirk turns into an innocent smile, which Isaac counters with narrowed eyes. Since you know how to cook so well." Oh, Eva's treading dangerous waters here. Isaac totally has the upper hand in the situation, since he can call her bluff even sooner than she can call his, considering he doesn't care if Nora knows the truth about him, not if Nora knows he lied because his roommate has a big fat gay crush on her. So Isaac tries to convey all of this with an equally innocent smile, a message Eva seems to receive very well, if the way her smile disappears immediately is anything to go by. "Maybe when I'm not so busy, Eva," he tells her. "I'll cook for all of you, even you, Nora." Isaac turns to look at Nora, who's looking a little out of the loop. For good reason, of course. Just a big meal and celebration of Eva learning how to cook. Nora has a laugh. "Okay," she shakes her head. "No, yes, okay, that sounds fun." She turns to look at Eva. "You trust him enough not to poison us, right?" Oh, she made a joke. Isaac's happy to know she's actually human and not just an android Eva built for herself who looks perfect and knows how to cook and walks around just majoring in women's studies like she actually has a future with it, and living in Madrid and London and all those things that happen to literally no one normal. Eva smiled at her as a little starstruck, and oh Jesus, woman, keep it in your pants. Yeah, I guess he's alright enough, she waves Nora off. I've known him long enough to trust him, except with my boyfriends. You see, 15, Eva, Isaac interrupts with a 15 years old. It's time to move on. Eva scoffs, not when it makes for a great story, it's not. Isaac spits, whatever, He gestures lamely behind him. I'll go play some video games or something, it's been a while. Nora nods. Yeah, of course, she smiles at Isaac, and oh, Jesus Christ, is she a fucking Barbie doll or something? Is this like that Lindsay Lohan movie Eva made him watch a couple of years back? I'm keeping you to that cooking offer, though, she teases, and Isaac has a momentary lapse of memory until he realizes she's talking about the lie he just made up literally a minute ago. Isaac's pretty sure Nora will forget about it eventually, or maybe just not push it, so Isaac fakes a laugh and waves her off. Of course, he says, smiling brightly at the both of them. So I'll just be out in the living room, he says pointedly, looking straight at Eva, where I can hear everything that's happening in here, clearly, just in case anyone wanted to know. Eva glares at him. Bye, Isaac, she dismisses him through gritted teeth. Have fun learning how to cook, Eva, he grins brightly, then turns around and walks to the living room, where he finally removes his shoes left and right, and then his coat, and then his smile immediately disappears, replaced by genuine worry for his friend. It's not that Isaac thinks Eva doesn't think she knows what she's doing. Isaac is sure she does. Eva's stubborn that way, where she thinks she has all the answers and control over her feelings, like she's invincible when she sets her mind to it, like she's forgotten all her previous endeavors and the way they've ended in nothing but disappointment and heartbreak. But Isaac remembers them, always does, whenever sets her sights on the impossible. And there's only so much Isaac can handle when he sees his friend broken like that, cooled into herself, tears running down her face, wondering what exactly is wrong with her. And the thing about Eva is that she's strong. She learned a long time ago that her opinion of herself is worth more than anyone else's, which Isaac was very proud of her for, but sometimes it seems like she forgets, or rather remembers the way her mother left her alone for months at a time, remembers when her friends decided she wasn't worth their time anymore, remembers the small things that shaped her into the greater person she is today. And Isaac gets it. He does. He's been there, and maybe they both handled it differently. They were both shaped into completely different people. Isaac into someone who refuses to take the bait, let someone have his trust again, and Eva into someone who trusts far too much, adamant on finding proof that the world isn't as cold as it's taught her it is. In one particular instance, when Eva had just been broken up with by an idiot man with a stupidly shaped head and a ridiculous tendency to wear fucking bow ties and a mad bun, Isaac shivers at the thought of them and frowns at his drunk self once again. Wherever he went, Eva told Isaac that the douche had asked if they were meant to be. Then why did he feel like Eva loved him more than he loved her? Which is just not the way you let down someone easily, that fucking idiot. At least go with it's not you, it's me line, rather than dumping all the fault on the other person. Just leave with your conscience clean at least. Though Isaac's learned not everyone has one, though that's just a psychological anomaly, which he tried to explain to Eva while he held her on the couch on which she wasn't having. Not everything has to be science, Isaac, she snapped at him. Sometimes people are cruel, and there's no reason for it. They have no excuse. Not everything comes down to a brain defect or whatever. They're cruel and that's it, and it doesn't mean I'm giving up. Here she'd set up to look Isaac straight in the eye, because not everyone is cruel, and not everyone will break me. And Isaac had looked her straight in the eye and said, ultimately, it's your decision. Because there is only so much Isaac can do, and that's what his friend needed to hear in the moment, and she cuddled back into Isaac's chest and sniffled for a little while longer before she fell asleep. Isaac can't protect Eva the way he protects himself. Isaac is aware that some people are stronger than others, and that's just fine. Eva is hopeful, and Isaac is not, and yet they still manage to stay in each other's lives and accept each other. But that doesn't mean they're always happy with the life the other's chosen to live, and Isaac is never, ever happy to see Eva breaking down, broken again, after another failed attempt at finding the person she's meant to be with. He doesn't think it's fair that Eva lets herself be played by the world this way, but Eva also doesn't think it's fair that Isaac doesn't. And so they end up here every single time, where Isaac is trying to protect Eva from falling into the deep, ridiculous hole it takes her days to climb out of, and Eva insisting Isaac is far too cynical for his own good. And Isaac knows, he knows this is where they're going. Eventually, Nora will marry this boyfriend of hers, or assure Eva that she can never be interested in her the way she's clearly interested in Nora, and Eva will break again. And Isaac will be there, wondering once again why she lets this happen to her, when it's so much easier to build the walls Isaac has spent years building around him, and not allow anyone to have the power to take you under. Eva's lived through people letting her down, lived through having the people closest to her never meeting her expectations, and yet she still has faith in things beyond her control. Isaac will never understand her. He hears the giggle loudly in the kitchen with Nora, and something undefinable squeezes at his heart. Isaac really wants to believe she'll treat lightly this time. Maybe she's grown, and maybe she's learned. But Isaac knows better. He falls onto the couch with a loud sigh. Well, at least this has definitely ruined whatever hard-on he was planning on getting in the bathroom. Now his thoughts are mostly filled with worry for Eva, overshadowing any memory of Evan, which Isaac isn't sure whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but he's going to say it's the former because he's just so tired of masturbating, and there's something he never thought he'd say. But it's just not as satisfying as the real thing, and also, his hand can only do so much every other day. He still needs to take notes at school and, use it for other things that are important. He needs the use of it, and it's no use to him if it's always a fucking sore. Isaac rubs at his eyes and wonders if he's going to play video games at all. To be frank, he hasn't played in a very long time. He has the console because once in a while Eva will like to play with him, and sometimes the boys will come over and play too. And that's fine, but he hasn't gamed alone since high school, he thinks, and that's also fine. Gaming alone can be a good experience or a lonely one, depending on the kind of person you are, and for Isaac, it's long become the latter. And he can't stop hearing Eva and Nora's quiet mutters in the kitchen, and hating the way he can do anything, and he thinks about just locking himself up in his bedroom and taking a nap like he always does. Naps during the day and hardly sleeps at night, but before he can even try to stand, his text notification goes off. He's ashamed to admit that his stomach jumps a little in anticipation, thinking Eva needs an outlet, and Isaac being more than willing to provide it, despite how much he's tried to convince himself it's been too much all day. And he hates the fact that he's a little disappointed when he pulls out his phone and sees Jonas' contact on his screen instead, when it's usually a pleasure, of course, considering that's his best friend. This whole situation with Evan is great, but he's starting to realize now it's really messing with his head, though that really doesn't stop Isaac from wanting it, which he knows is part of the problem, but Isaac, like many other things in life, is choosing to ignore the fact. He swipes at the screen of his phone and is taken straight to Jonas' text conversation and reads the new message. Jonas: "Hey, Maddie's coming over to hang, you want in?" Isaac snorts. Jonas asks as if Isaac's ever refused. He types a reply. Isaac: "Yeah, on my way." Jonas: "Cool." Isaac looks over at where he's left his shoes, then at his coat, and finally looks over at the wall covering the kitchen. He grimaces, suddenly afraid to leave Eva alone with this situation, but he knows he'd be better off hanging out with the guys and getting high, trying not to worry about this, trying not to think about having sex with Evan every other hour. In the end, it comes down to what's best for his sanity, so he gets off the couch and walks over to his shoes. Once he puts both of them on and grabs his coat, he hesitantly makes his way to the kitchen. Eva and Nora are standing far too close together, Nora laughing at the way Eva is clearly pretending to be hopeless at chopping carrots, and Isaac bites his lips, worried. He doesn't know if he should interrupt them and announce his exit, or if he should let this go on uninterrupted. He wants Eva to know he's absolutely onto her, but he also doesn't want Eva to rant to him for about half an hour when he comes home about how Isaac doesn't have to mom her all the time, and she knows what she's doing. Isaac, can you just once leave her alone? So Isaac licks his lips and quietly makes his way out of the kitchen unnoticed, grabbing the keys he'd left on the table and making his way out of the apartment. He fights with the doorknob for half a minute, then finally makes his way down the hall and down the stairs. It's cold, but Isaac can't really feel it when he's thinking about many, many things, and not all of them are good, but not all of them are bad. And he thinks that's what he's made up of. Nothing concrete and nothing special. A mess of ultimate proportions. Magnus and Jonas' place is always weirdly clean. Isaac thinks it's either Jonas' doing or one of them is springing for a housekeeper, because he'd never in a million years would have guessed they could keep things this tidy. Not the two of them together, at least, and Isaac likes to joke often about how their apartment smells like piss, but it usually always smells of lavender, and Isaac can never find the source of the scent, so it, really bothers him. The only thing Isaac doesn't like about their place is Jonas' demon cat. Sometimes the cat will leave them alone, stick to Jonas' room and ignore their punny human existence. But other times, the cat makes it his mission to walk all over them, hiss at Isaac at every turn, and make sure Isaac knows Jonas is his property and his property only. Which, alright cat, he's not going to fight you for him. So today's one of those days where the cats decided to roam around the living room with them, eyeing them all suspiciously like he's waiting for Muddy or Isaac to make the wrong move. Isaac thinks the cat doesn't exactly like Magnus, but he tolerates him as he lives with him, so his usual prey is Isaac or Muddy or both. Both he and Muddy keep eyeing the cat just as suspiciously, even though they're both probably high off their asses by now. Your cat's literally trying to kill us, Muddy tells Jonas, and Jonas frowns. He's not. He gestures towards the cat. He's literally fat and orange. He wouldn't lay a finger on you guys. Isaac and Muddy exchange a look. This is why we don't stay over anymore, man. Muddy looks back at Jonas. We're both pretty sure we'll be murdered in our sleep by him. Jonas rolls his eyes. You're both so fucking dramatic. Magnus makes a noise. He's alright, he says, just a little creepy sometimes. Like I'll be eating a Dorito and he looks at me as if I'm eating his fucking sibling or something. I think he might be a little overprotective of everything else that's orange. He'd love early 2000s Kim Kardashian then, Muddy mutters, and Isaac laughs at the ridiculousness of the statement. Also because he's high, and right now any joke anyone makes is probably the most hilarious joke he's ever heard in his life. You can all stop being mean to Garfield now, Jonas protests, frowning slightly. And that's another thing, Muddy says. Did you make him fat on purpose, just so you could justify the name you gave him? Jonas sniffs. I'd never do that to him. He's just a glutton, and it's his life to live. I'm not going to control him, I don't own him. He's just my bud. The rest of them roll their eyes in tandem. Oh hey, Jonas looks over at Magnus, who looks like he's starting to realize he's grown more than one head. Sometimes we just isn't Magnus' best friend, Isaac thinks. What's the deal with Thomas? You never said another word about him, and I haven't asked because I haven't been high enough to try. Har har, Magnus rolls his eyes. No new developments. He's definitely ghosted me. I'm left here in Ghost Town pretending I didn't even ever have feelings for him. Dude, you knew him for like a couple of days, Muddy points out. A week and a half, Magnus snaps back. That's longer than Britney Spears' first marriage. I don't think that's really getting your point across, Max. Isaac offers, and Magnus sighs dramatically, falls back against the back of the couch. He's nearly pouting, and Isaac would say it's a full-on pout, but his glasses are fogging up again, so he can't be sure. You'd think Isaac would learn to take his glasses off in cases like these, but regardless of the situation, glasses on and fogged, or glasses off completely, it's not like his vision would be any better either way, so he's going to stick with his glasses. At least the fog sometimes helps clear them up afterwards. The bad thing is that I didn't even get laid, Magnus says. I mean, it was great for what it was, don't get me wrong, but it really would have been nice to get some action too. At least that way I'd know the reason why he ghosted me too. Why is that, Jonas asks. Because of my sex skills, Magnus says. I hardly ever get to practice. Muddy snorts. Magnus, I'm sure you jerk off, don't you? He waits for Magnus' responding blush. Don't you just do with your hand what you do with yourself? Isaac glances at Muddy, eyebrows raised judgmentally. Muddy mutters something that might be an apology, Isaac can't know for sure, and turns his attention back to the wheat. Magnus is lying deeply across from him, digging a deeper hole into the couch when he sinks down into it further. Magnus has confessed to Isaac before. He doesn't really have much practice with gay sex. and he wasn't sure about the logistics of it. He told Isaac he'd watched gay porn after Vilde left him, proclaiming herself a lesbian, and it definitely did something for him. But even if you watched it over and over and over again, Magnus said it didn't really help him know to place what word. Isaac had pointed out it's a very simple process, much like having sex with a woman, if you're talking penetration, but in his experience, he's at least sure both parties actually come. He's sure the same can be said for girl and girl sex too. Straight sex must be so disappointing for both parties, but mostly women, he thinks. Anyway, he digresses. He tried to explain to Magnus that he was under no obligation to do anything he didn't want to with another man, and if all he ever wanted to do was jerk someone else off, that was fine, or if all he wanted to do was penetration, then that was fine too. He remembers Magnus trying not to giggle every time Isaac said the word penetration, which led Isaac to point out maybe he wasn't mature enough to have sex anyway, which led to a whole other argument until they landed back on sex and porn and the difference thereof. So Isaac had recommended he watched boyfriend porn, far more realistic. Sex was shown to be much less hardcore, and it was easy to make out what they were doing if what Magnus was looking for was a lesson. Magnus had asked Isaac if that's what he watched, and Isaac stuttered at that sure, of course, and tried not to think back to all the public toilet sex porn he's ever bookmarked. So this means Magnus's experience stretches to some boyfriend porn he's watched in Isaac's expertise, though he does recall advising Magnus something similar to what Maddie has just told him. Practice on yourself. Do what you would do with yourself, which is fine, but Isaac doesn't really think straight people should have a say on what and how they should learn to have sex. Even what I do with myself sometimes doesn't do the trick, Magnus admits quietly. Face flushed with embarrassment. I mean, hands, sure, but everything else? Just can't do it. Isaac sighs. Doesn't always do the trick the first couple of times, Max. Magnus stays quiet for a moment, and the rest of them let him gear up to speak, since they know this is something bothering Magnus very prominently, even if all of them do want to move on to safer, less depressing topics. Okay, Magnus sits up, leans forward with his elbows on his knees. Real talk. Have any of you ever tried to suck your own dick? They all groan. Well, at least they know he feels better now. Magnus, what the fuck? Muddy rolls his eyes. That sounds uncomfortable as fuck, Jonas adds with a grimace. It's a thing, Magnus exclaims offensively. It's totally a thing. I've watched guys in porn do it and it looks like it feels really good. Porn actors are supposed to make things look like they feel really good, Jonas points out. Besides, I really doubt porn actors actually ever masturbate. Like, don't you think they're way too tired of all the sex they have during the day to try again at home? They all look at Jonas. That has nothing to do with the fact, Magnus blinks, and Jonas shrugs his shoulders, conceding. But seriously, none of you have ever tried it? They all shake their heads. Isaac? Isaac furrows his brows. Why would I have tried it? Why aren't you specifically asking Jonas or Maddie? Because, Magnus scoffs, you're probably the most flexible out of all of us. Isaac raises an eyebrow, and they all sit in silence for a moment before Maddie snorts loudly. Dude, Maddie laughs. How would you know that? Magnus is blushing underneath his glare. I pay attention, God, he mutters, and both Jonas and Maddie keep laughing at the admission. Do you check Isaac out? Maddie asks between laughter, and Magnus rolls his eyes. Before, I used to, he snaps defensively. I was trying to come to terms with the sexuality, okay? It was merely for science. Isaac bites the inside of his cheek in order to avoid laughing out loud with the two other boys. Oh, Magnus, he looks at him. I'm so flattered. Magnus mutters something unintelligible under his breath. Then Jonas bumps his shoulder with Magnus's. The real question is, Jonas starts, have you tried it before, Magnus? Magnus nods. Duh, he replies quickly and easily, and well, fair enough. Couldn't do it though, like I rolled over on my bed and fell on my ass instead. Jonas raised a judgmental eyebrow. All to suck your own dick? In an attempt to, yes. Why don't you just try and go to a gay club with Isaac? Jonas asks. People offer to suck your dick there all the time. I've gotten plenty of offers I've actually been tempted to accept myself. No, but I want the first guy to suck my dick to be special. The first guy who attempted to suck your dick was you. No, Listen, what I mean is, this is where Isaac tunes out of the heated conversation Jonas and Magnus are now having, not really here for it. His body feels light and his eyes want to close, and all this talk about sucking dick, whether by other people or themselves, he guesses, just kept reminding him of his time with Evan, which is not a good idea, not in front of the rest of the boys. They'd think he was getting turned on at the thought of Magnus sucking his own dick. God forbid, and the worst part is, He wouldn't even have anything smart to counter with, as he can't really come out and say, "No, that's not it, I'm just thinking about Evan." Isaac allows his head to go other places, out of bounds, visiting the stars and everything he's learned about them, running them over and over and over in his head like he's got nothing to do down here and everything to do up in the sky. He lets his brain teach him lessons he's already been taught, paint him memories he remembers every day. Loses control of his thoughts for just a moment, doesn't let himself think about Evan or the way his lips feel attached to his neck or the last time Hey! Isaac opens his eyes to look over at Maddie, who's looking at him curiously. Magnus and Jonas are still bickering across from them, something Isaac is sure they do every day considering they see so much of each other, and Isaac has to blink a couple of times before he breaks completely out of his stupor. "Hi," Isaac greets back, raising an eyebrow. "What's up?" Maddie searches his expression for a moment, then tilts his head. "Are you okay, man?" he asks quietly, and Isaac is trying to pinpoint how literally everyone can ask him that while he's high off his ass. "You look way out of it." Isaac smiles crookedly. "We'll do that to you." "Nah," Maddie shakes his head. "I mean, like, out of it. Like you don't want to be here, so you're purposely going somewhere else. You're usually babbling nonsense to us." Ugh, Isaac doesn't really talk that much about science when he's high. There's no other explanation for it. Both Mutter and Maddie keep noticing this. Isaac sticks with his usual story. "I'm just stressed," he tells Maddie. "It's not a big deal." Maddie hums contemplatively, then grins. "We can go to a gay bar on Friday if you want," he offers, and Isaac scoffs amused. "What? I'm serious." "Maddie, we don't have to go to a gay bar," Isaac tells him. "We can literally go to any bar. I don't mind it. I never have." "Yeah," Maddie agrees, "but the chances of you getting laid triple at a gay bar. And they're darker, for some reason, so the guys can get a good look at your ugly mug." Isaac scoffs. "You're a wonderful friend," he replies, biting his lip to keep from saying something like, "I really don't need to get laid right now. It's happening regularly nowadays. I really don't have time for cups right now, and I'm not really interested in them. I know it's a hard concept to grasp for you, but really, I don't need to get laid right now." Maddie's eyebrows rise. "Oh," he grins mischievously. "Have things finally developed with Julian?" Isaac stares at him. "Why do you think there's something between me and Julian?" Isaac is perplexed. "We're literally just co-workers or friends or whatever," he amends, because that's something Julian's decided they are, and Isaac can see it, considering Julian's friends with the rest of the boys. So it's not like he necessarily has to bump him down immediately to co-worker anymore. "You guys are going to get ideas in his head if you keep this shit up." "Oh," Maddie holds up both of his hands. "All right, man, no stress." He sits back on the couch, but there's a hint of smirk on his lips, which serves to irritate Isaac further. He's about to start complaining some more when his text notification goes off in his pocket. Isaac's heart races of its own accord, without Isaac's permission whatsoever, and he can't help the haste with which he digs his hands into his pocket and pulls his phone out to look at the screen. Isaac's stomach swoops at the sight of Evan's contact lighting up his screen, and he licks his lips, making sure to angle the phone slightly away from Maddie when he unlocks it. Evan, boys are gone, I think for 3 hours or so. Busy?" Isaac really hates how quickly he types a reply and how eager he is to immediately agree. "Isaac, on my way." He locks his phone and pockets it again, looking up at the boys. He interrupts Jonas and Magnus' bickering by clearing his throat loudly. "Hey," he calls out, and they all turn to look at him. "I'm gonna bounce," he says, putting out his joint and standing from the couch. "I just got a text from Eskil," he amends quickly. "Yeah, work. He wants me to come in for inventory." Isaac clears his throat, not suspiciously at all. They all look at him incredulously. "That's kind of random, don't you think?" Jonas asks cautiously. "Are you sure he's not calling you over just to seduce you?" Isaac glares at him. "Seriously?" He snaps. "Don't talk about Eskil that way." Jonas holds up his hands, placating. "Yeah, okay, sorry, dude," he apologizes, and it seems like he means it, so Isaac lets it go. "Do what you have to do. You still coming to the bar on Friday?" Isaac starts putting on his shoes, left and right, and then his coat. "Yeah," he tells him. "Of course, why wouldn't I?" The boys all exchange a glance, so Isaac raises an eyebrow at them suspiciously. "What?" "Just, you've been ditching us a lot lately," Jonas nods slowly, "or showing up really late or something. I don't know, we just want to make sure you're okay." Isaac sighs loudly. He hadn't noticed exactly just how much he's been ditching his friends in favor of sex. He might definitely be an addict at this point, Isaac doesn't know, and he would ask Eva if he didn't think sex addiction and her major were bullshit, so he's not actually going to. Still, he feels a little guilty about this, even if he does ditch them for absolutely magnificent sex, so he shifts his weight and sighs loudly. Yeah, sorry, he apologizes sincerely. It's just, I'm either stuck covering someone's shift or trying to finish homework, he lies. And his stomach doesn't seem to agree with his bullshit. But I promise I'll finish everything by Friday so I don't ditch you guys again, alright? They all look at him a little suspiciously, and Muddy is the first one to nod. That's chill. Isaac smiles at him gratefully. Alright, he announces, saluting them with one hand. I'm off. Don't do anything I wouldn't do, boys. That means we can barely do anything, Magnus scoffs, and Isaac promptly flips him off. Isaac doesn't want to readily admit that he spent the entire way to Evan's place thinking about what he wanted to do. But if you think about, there was a lot of dick-sucking talk back at Jonas and Magnus' place, so it's only normal that's exactly what he was thinking of doing when he got there, right? It was good. It's always good. Mind you, but this time he immediately forced Evan down to his knees and didn't really have to say much after that. Evan quickly got with the program, and all Isaac could do was tug at Evan's hair, throw his head back against the wall, and gasp Evan's name repeatedly. When Evan seemed to want to help himself out, Isaac kicked his hand away, and when Evan finished with him, Isaac eagerly returned the favor. It was good because they're starting to communicate exactly what they want now, without actually demanding it out loud. Not that they're not demanding it aggressively, but it helps with the no talking rule, and it's so much easier to get dressed and leave without really saying a goodbye, since they've both silently agreed that's not necessary, lest they start acting like polite acquaintances, which they're not if their sex has anything to say about it. Today, Evan's lying on his bed with nothing but his boxers on, sifting through a photo album of some sort while Isaac gets dressed, and Isaac plans on making his usual exit. Quietly slip out the door, say nothing to Evan as he does, and go on about his day like nothing had happened. Spend the rest of the day in enough post-sex bliss so that he doesn't have to jerk off for the rest of it. This is a win, really. He's glad Evan asked him over. Isaac is pulling up his pants and zipping them up when he catches sight of the drawings taped to Evan's closet doors. Isaac supposes that subconsciously he's always known they are there. But today's the first time he actually pays attention to what they are, and he glances at Evan hesitantly. He seems to be enthralled with whatever he's looking at, so Isaac picks up his shirt from the floor and quietly steps closer to the closet, pretending to take a sweet time putting on his shirt and perusing the drawings. They are nothing like what Evan had shown a year back at the gallery. These are drawn on torn notebook paper or torn printer paper, and they're either drawn with pencil, blue ink, or black ink, which Isaac supposes means they've been drawn over time and not in the same day. He furrows his brows as he walks, takes them all in. There are drawings of Muslim women wearing burqas or hijabs. Then there are drawings that turn into comic strips, silly things Isaac might find on the internet, funny stuff that leads Isaac to deduce Evan is actually a funny person. And there are sketches of different people in Evan's life. He spots one of Elias and Yusuf, sitting next to each other on their front porch, spots one of Jonas and Muddy, even one of Magnus hanging on some monkey bars, spots one of Mutta and Elias arm wrestling. They are cartoonish sketches, almost, but it's easy to make out who's who. They seem to be made in humor, nothing serious, and something like curiosity squeezes at Isaac's heart, something he most definitely doesn't want. You like them? Isaac startles and immediately turns around to find Evan looking at him a little contemplatively, and Isaac swallows harshly in an attempt to hide his blush. He's quick to slip his shirt back on as if that's what he meant to do all along, but turns back around to look at the sketches again. Did you draw them? He asks, skipping over Evan's question. Evan snorts from where he sits on the bed. Yeah, he tells Isaac. You should know this, you were at my art showing a year ago. The silence that hangs between them at the memory isn't long, just tense. Isaac doesn't want to be part of it, doesn't want to live in it longer than he has to. Yeah, Isaac concedes, but these are funny and those were pretentious. For a moment, Evan's silent, as if he's trying to figure out whether or not Isaac is joking, and then he snorts loudly once again. Shut up, Walterchen, he replies, but there is no actual malice behind the comment. Something Isaac finds strange, but doesn't really allow to settle. Instead, he keeps looking through the sketches, laughs quietly at some that are ridiculous enough to merit the laugh. Now that he doesn't necessarily have to stay quiet so Evan doesn't notice him snooping, he purses his lips before asking, "So you just draw these for fun?" He looks back at Evan, who looks a little somber. "Yeah," he admits. "Gotta remind myself sometimes I still like to draw." Isaac's brows furrow. "How do you mean?" "Well," Evan shifts his weight on the bed. "The more I keep drawing things that other people tell me to draw, the more difficult it gets to remember why I started," he explains. "To remember that this is something I actually like to do, that there are the styles that other people expect from me, and then there's my own." Isaac glances back at the sketches. "Why are you drawing what other people are asking you to draw?" "I'm a freelance artist," he tells Isaac, "and a freelance photographer. It's the only way I'm getting myself through film school." Isaac blinks stupidly at the words. Film school? Isaac was sure art was the only thing Evan did for a living. Photography, even though it never crossed his mind. It's close enough to art that Isaac can understand. But film school? Out of everything else he could have guessed about Evan, it doesn't really make sense. Isaac licks his lips. "So, the stuff you drew at the gallery last year," he starts looking back at Evan, "not your style?" Evan hums. "No, that's not it," he says. "It's more like the gallery space for the showing was a favor from a friend," he explains. "I needed the money, and that's what people look for the most, surrealists' paintings." Isaac frowns. "Like the literary movement?" "Yeah," Evan nods, "like that, except in art, which is pretty much the same concept. Just dreamlike paintings, taken from the subconscious mind, meant to unnerve the human eye or fight against the suppression of the rational mind or whatever." If that's what Evan's paintings were meant to do at the gallery, then he certainly did a good job. Isaac remembers being unnerved and frustrated at the sight of the first painting he stood in front of, before Evan came around and turned it all into complete shit. "So, like Pablo Picasso," Isaac offers, and Evan laughs softly, most likely remembering their first meeting as well. "Yeah," Evan agrees, though he didn't join the surrealist movement until later. "He said my paintings were influenced by him, but that's not true." He shakes his head. "I took more inspiration from Frida Kahlo. She used to deny her art was surrealistic. She insisted she didn't paint dreams, didn't paint the subconscious mind the way the movement warranted. Her paintings were conscious. She painted her life." Isaac shifts his weight, not understanding and hating it. "So the paintings shown in the gallery were just that. My life, my feelings, distorted to look like something out of a dream, except they really just express just how little control I feel like I have over my life, and how I wish I did. I didn't fight against the rational mind, I expanded on it." Isaac doesn't know what to do with this information. It strikes him suddenly just how little he actually knows about Evan, and that everything he'd assumed about him seemed to be falling apart around him, and he doesn't like it. He doesn't want to see this part of Evan. He doesn't. The theory of probability swims around in his head like a warning, but his feet aren't listening, glued to the carpet of Evan's room. "Hence the comics," Evan finally finishes, gesturing towards the closet doors. "Reminds me not everything has to be a core or have a meaning. Sometimes things can be taken at face value, and I can enjoy drawing for myself. At least I have control over that." Isaac bites the inside of his cheek and looks back at the sketches. He can see where Evan's coming from. They are light-hearted, but Isaac can almost feel the care and fondness jumping off the pages. Even if Evan meant them to be taken at face value, meant them to be nothing but silly comics, silly drawings of his own, he drew them with care, with admiration, with inspiration. And Isaac realizes now why maybe his subconscious refused to notice the sketches taped to the closet doors. It reminds him that outside of this, Evan is still his own person, a person Isaac knows very little about. And Isaac thinks that's okay. He shouldn't. They work well this way. The less they know about each other, the easier it is to keep this as it is. Nothing complicated, nothing but sex. Nothing but something to make the both of them feel good and forget they were people outside of the argument they once had. He realizes, yes, that this is probably the longest conversation they've had since they started this thing 3 weeks ago. No, maybe the longest conversation they've had at all, barring any drunken conversation they might have made that first night, and it hasn't once felt bitter or aggressive, but just like a chat, like any normal acquaintances would. Something scratching at the surface, something you talk to a stranger about when they're trying to get to know them.
and that's not exactly good, not for Isaac. That's not something he wants to think about when he kisses Evan, or feels his teeth scraping at his neck, or his hands scraping at his hair. He doesn't want to know that there's some more to him than physical appearance, that there's an entirely different person inside of him making Isaac feel good, feel better than he has in years. Isaac finally walks over and grabs his glasses. Then too he dropped his shoes and coat, putting both articles of clothing on at the same time. Evan is looking at his feet in amusement, which Isaac doesn't understand, but he lets it slide, if only because he's learned enough about Evan for once in the night. He lingers at the door for a second longer, before he offers Evan an awkward wave. "I'm going to go now," he says, something they've never actually done. It's not technically a goodbye, but it is an announcement of retrieval, and that's different enough for Isaac to panic, just a little. And then his mouth decides to keep on running, because why wouldn't it go against Isaac's wishes? "I do, by the way," he says, and Evan tilts his head in a manner that's way too fucking endearing to be comfortable, and Isaac has the crazy urge to tug at his hair. "Do what?" Evan asks. "Like them." He gestures towards the drawings on the closet doors. "You asked if I liked them." "I do." There's a second where they both look at each other awkwardly, and then Evan's lips turn upward into a small smile. Isaac has to fight his lips before they do the same. "Thanks," Evan replies, and Isaac nods once tightly. He finally turns to open the door, and he walks out of the bedroom quietly, closes the door without trying to make a sound. He stands outside the bedroom for a moment longer, trying to gather his thoughts, trying to make sense of what had just happened, but the longer he stands there, the more his stomach churns. So he licks his lips and walks towards the stairs, where he takes them down one step at a time, eyes glued to his feet. 3 weeks. They've done so good for 3 weeks. And then Isaac decides to go ahead and notice the drawings taped to the closet doors, and Isaac! Isaac quickly snaps his head up, almost tripping when he misses a step. Elias is looking at him from the bottom of the stairs, kindly as it were, but very, very confused, the same way Yusuf had looked that first morning after. He's definitely out of excuses this time. He can't blame it on his drunkenness, and he can't exactly explain he'd been fucking Evan upstairs for fun, so his mind is trying to quickly come up with an explanation that makes sense and isn't suspicious, but he's blanking completely. Elias seems to find the lack of response from Isaac weird, which, yeah, fair. So he presses a little. "Hey," he greets again, voice puzzled. "What are you doing here?" Isaac stutters for a moment. He was scoring some free weed from me," comes Evan's voice from the top of the staircase, and as Isaac turns around from where he stuck 3 steps up from the floor, Evan's leaning against the railing at the very top, dressed from head to toe, cool and collected, as if he hadn't just had Isaac stick down his throat and vice versa. Isaac has no idea how he's doing it. Isaac's knees are about to give away, to be honest. He turns back to look at Elias, who looks even more perplexed than before. "What?" He looks between the two of them. "You guys are sharing weed?" Isaac shrugs his shoulders, trying for nonchalant. "Why is that so weird?" Evan asks from the top floor, and Elias gives him a disbelieving look. "Maybe because you guys couldn't stand the sight of each other a couple of weeks ago?" he offers, and Evan hums as if considering the reply. Isaac just really, really wants to leave, before his mouth opens up and spills the beans and ruins everything. "Desperate times, I guess," Evan shrugs casually, and Isaac really, really needs to get out of here before he blows the entire thing. "Yep," Isaac pipes up heavily. "Had to get my weed somewhere, you know." Elias furrows his brows. "But doesn't Jonas—" "Shit, look at the time!" Isaac looks down at his wrist. "I've gotta go. Eva's expecting me home soon." Elias looks at Isaac's wrist, which does not, in fact, have a watch that can tell him the time. "You're bye, Elias!" Isaac exclaims cheerfully, walking down the last 3 steps and bolting for the front door, not looking back once. He takes a deep breath when he's outside of the porch and walking down the lawn towards the tram stop, not sure why his heart is pounding so loudly. Isaac thinks, sure, they almost got caught, but there's a small part of his brain that's wondering what exactly would be so bad about that. It's not like their friends don't have any concept of what friends with benefits entail, and they would probably understand considering their history, but then he thinks about all the questions and the warnings and the assumptions, and the idea evaporates as quickly as it appeared, because no, it would be very bad, and they'd already had a really weird moment up there today, so that's enough, Isaac thinks. He's probably going to go ahead and keep his distance, at least for a week. Let that settle in and be forgotten so they can start over again. No conversations, no lingering, no reminiscing. It was easy before. Isaac's sure starting over will be easy again, no problem. It's Wednesday, 2 days since the incident at Evan's place, and neither of them have contacted the other, which actually fills Isaac with a sense of relief. It means Evan's probably feeling as awkward about what happened as Isaac is, which in turn means they can probably go back to their regularly scheduled programming in no time. Though Isaac's also not sure if he'll text first or if Evan will, or if this is some sort of a standoff until one of them can't stand the tension anymore and needs another quick fuck. But Isaac's stubborn, and he knows Evan's stubborn too, so that might be a while to find out, and thankfully Isaac's been far too preoccupied with both trying to forget what happened on Monday and trying to get some homework done. He's been keeping himself far too busy, and maybe on purpose, yes, but it's working, so it doesn't really matter. He's buttoning up his museum vest as he walks inside, not really facing forward when he bumps chest first into someone. Isaac stumbles backwards, then looks up to find Eskiel, looking dejected and exhausted. Isaac furrows his brows, finishing the last button, then tilting his head to the right. "Are you okay?" he asks cautiously, and Eskiel sighs dramatically. "The lion is on the prowl today," he tells Isaac, which doesn't make any sense to him. "I even had to bring Lynn in on her day off so we could manage the situation together." Isaac blinks at him. "Eskiel," he starts slowly, "I want to feel your pain, I do. But it's kind of hard when you keep speaking in metaphors," he points out, running a hand through his hair in an attempt to tame it. "Chris!" Eskiel exclaims dramatically, and oh, there it is. He finally got a shift, and he's been flirting with literally everyone instead of doing his work, and Lynn's already scolded him for it, and I've already scolded him for it, and he just keeps flirting. "Listen," Eskiel looks at Isaac, "I understand the male's instinct to spread their seed, whether that seed takes or not," he tells Isaac, and Isaac doesn't really think this is a conversation that can happen between an employee and a manager, but Eskiel's not exactly stopping him, and it's not like Isaac's going to report this, so he lets Eskiel go on his tangent. "But there is only so much seed you can spread at your workplace." Eskiel, Isaac stops him before someone hears this entire conversation and actually does report him. "Listen, I know it's hard to work with him, but he's coming after you, Isaac." Eskiel interrupts him. "He's been asking around about whether or not you're working today. If you want to call in sick right now, I'll let you." Isaac stares at him. "I need the money." "Oh, you poor, unfortunate soul," Eskiel says, reaching out to squeeze Isaac's shoulder. "Godspeed in there." Isaac rolls his eyes. "I'll be fine," he assures Eskiel. "It's not like I'm going to be swooning over him. He smells like an ex-body spray convention." "That's what you say now," Eskiel tells him, "but you have to admit he has a charming face." Isaac laughs. "Not my type." "What is your type?" Eskiel tilts his head curiously. "Well, blonde for one, blue eyes, stupidly deep voice. Isaac would very much prefer it if the other person didn't like him, for starters." "Taller," he pats Eskiel on the arm. "Can I clock in now? I'm losing precious money standing here." Eskiel sighs. "Fine, fine." He steps aside and waves over to the front desk. "But don't say I didn't warn you." "I would never," Isaac smiles at him, then makes his way past, walking over to the front desk. Julian's behind it today, scrolling through the computer with furrowed brows, and Isaac stops in front of him to look at him in amusement for a moment before he says, "Hey, Julian." Julian flinches as if he's heard the world's loudest Latin football announcer yell out a goal, then composes himself when he sees Isaac, face flushing and crimson red. "Oh, hi, Isaac," he mutters, and Isaac can hear the embarrassment in his voice. Isaac doesn't want to be a dick and dwell on his antics, but it was really funny. Still, Isaac bites the inside of his cheek, holds back his laughter, and instead tries for a kind smile that probably looks a little forced. "Hi," he clears his throat. "Mind if I clock in?" "Oh," Julian scrambles to get out of his chair. No, not at all. You can..." "Yeah, go ahead." He gestures wildly to the computer screen, and Isaac walks around the desk, leaning over the commandeer the mouse. "You know you don't have to stand, right?" Isaac asks him, raising an eyebrow when he glances over. "Like, you've done this before, we can all reach the computer." Julian clears his throat, shrugs off the comment. "Yeah, but..." He clears his throat again, this time louder. "You know, I was getting tired of sitting down anyway, so I thought, what the hell, right?" Isaac finishes clocking in, then straightens his back and looks at Julian in amusement. "Sure, dude," he huffs a small laugh. "Whatever you need, you know." Julian's mouth parts open as if he's about to say something, but then it shuts tightly like he thought better of it. Isaac would be curious. He would, if he wasn't already dreading his shift on the main floor, ever since he asked Esquila to schedule him much more often at the space exhibit. But since he switched shifts with Sarah today, he's scheduled on the main floor, where she would have been working. So it's just something he's going to have to put up with, he guesses. He's not dreading it as much as he used to. After being away from it for a while, it doesn't sound like the hell it used to be. He can survive one shift away from the space exhibit, really he can. So, maybe we could do that. Isaac snapped back from his thoughts by babbling Julian, his hands tied behind his back and his gaze on his feet. Isaac blinks, catching only the last of what Julian said, so he makes an apologetic face and clears his throat. Sorry, dude, my mind was somewhere else, he explains. What did you want to do again? Julian's gaze rises to meet Isaac's again, and he suddenly looks both relieved and dejected. He shakes his head once, as if shaking himself out of his thoughts, and shrugs. No, nothing, I just wanted to know if you'd like to walk to the tram station together again, like we did a couple of weeks back. Did they do that? Isaac can't pinpoint the day, but he's sure Julian's right if he's reminding Isaac. He doesn't see any reason why Julian would lie. Yeah, sure, he smiles at Julian, who suddenly looks relieved. I can meet you here after closing if you want. Yeah, Julian nods enthusiastically. Yeah, sounds good. Isaac smiles one last time at Julian, before walking past him and making his way to the section he's been assigned to today. Thankfully, far, far away from the stream. That's not his problem today. Isaac adjusts his glasses to get a better look at who's standing over at the section, and almost laughs when he sees Chris leaning against the wall and seemingly talking a single mom up. He really does hope some kid pees in the stream today. Or two. The first 2 hours of his shift are boring. He gets a couple of questions from some kids and helps some others steer some of the interactive exhibits, but it's nothing to write home about. He enjoys it, though. Better than having parents screaming at you because they didn't raise their children right in any case. It's about a half hour later when it gets irritating. It has nothing to do with the people walking around the museum, mind you, but somehow, when the museum quiets down enough, Chris manages to stride over to Isaac's section. Isaac knows this without having to look over. He smells him immediately. Isaac busies himself with wiping some of the exhibits down, pretending he doesn't feel Chris's presence looming behind him. After about a minute of this, Chris clears his throat pointedly, and Isaac closes his eyes and inhales, gathering up the strength to get through this, whatever it's going to be. Isaac turns around and gives Chris a look. Yes, he asks, bypassing any kind of greeting that might give Chris the wrong idea, which, come to think of it, might just be every kind of greeting, including a yes. His point is proven when Chris smirks at Isaac, shrugs his shoulders casually. Just came over to say hi, he tells Isaac. Hi, Isaac deadpans and turns back to continue disinfecting the exhibit as if he hadn't been interrupted at all. Isaac can feel Chris's irritation coming off him in waves, which only serves to fuel Isaac to ignore him even more. Still, it only takes a moment for Chris to shake this off and try again. He walks around the exhibit so that he stands across from Isaac, and now Isaac can see him from his peripheral, which is probably just as bad as seeing him in full HD. He has half a mind to take his glasses off just so he can get a little bit of space and not have to brave through his face. So, Chris leans against the exhibit in what Isaac supposes is meant to look like a seductive move. But it only serves to irritate Isaac further. He looks up and glares at Chris. I'm cleaning that, he snaps, and Chris promptly takes his hand off the exhibit, holding both of them up offensively. All right, I get it, he tells Isaac. A model employee, I can respect that. Isaac thinks Chris must definitely be terrible at his job if he thinks disinfecting an exhibit makes anyone a model employee, but he doesn't say this out loud. Instead, he crosses his arms over his chest and raises his eyebrows at Chris. What do you want, Chris? He asks, if only to move this conversation along. We're working. No stress, Chris smirks. And, Isaac wants to punch it off his stupidly and yet admittedly handsome face. I was just going to make you an offer you can't refuse. Isaac blinks at him. What, are you in the fucking Godfather? Chris frowns. The what? Oh my god. Never mind, Isaac rolls his eyes. I can assure you, though, whatever you're thinking about offering me, I'm already passing on it. Chris walks around the exhibit to lean closer towards Isaac, and Isaac, in turn, leans further away. He glares up at Chris, annoyed and so obviously not interested, but does Chris know how to take any signs? Isaac's bet is on no. Listen, Chris says, you're hot, right? He pauses as if waiting for Isaac to confirm this allegation, which, what the fuck? What do you want me to say to that? Never mind, Chris waves it off. You're hot, and I'm hot, and lately I've been thinking about how Absolutely attractive we would look together. In bed, late at night, most likely sweating, I don't know. Isaac takes an entire step back, making sure there's at least 2 feet of distance between them. He's about to reply with something along the lines of, "Stick your own dick up your ass," when Chris decides to continue. "Nothing serious," he assures Isaac, "just once, one time, and then we'll never have to talk about it again." Isaac pulls a face. Okay, sure. Isaac might be getting laid by a person he doesn't very much like at the moment. He'll concede to that, but if there's one redeeming quality Evan seems to have so far, it's that fact that he's not Christopher Schistad. Playboy, extraordinaire, laziest employee of the year, walking ex-body spray commercial, egoistical and disgusting asshole who thinks he can win anyone over with a fucking smile and his looks, and who gives a damn about his personality, right? Isaac knows that may work for some people, otherwise Chris would not be this confident when walking up to people he's hardly ever spoken to and propositioning them, but Isaac likes to think he has standards, and those do not include brown-eyed men with carefully waxed eyebrows. Not that Isaac has anything against men waxing their eyebrows, it's just that he thinks Chris could probably do a better job at it. Pass, Isaac spits through a clawing smile, but this doesn't seem to deter Chris at all. If anything, it seems to egg him on further, and takes one step closer to Isaac, which only makes Isaac take another one back. "Do you not understand the concept of personal space?" Isaac barks, and Chris rolls his eyes. "I'm not trying to kidnap you, Isaac. I'm just trying to sleep with you. It's not that hard a concept to grasp." "Well, so is personal space," he repeats, and Chris sighs loudly. "I'm going to keep pushing this," Chris warns him, and Isaac stares at him as if he's growing 2 heads. "I could report you," Isaac warns him, and man, would the managers really love that, finally having an excuse to fire Chris, kick him out the door, and watch him fall on his ass. That's sexual harassment. "What's stopping you?" Chris ignores the threat, which just proves to Isaac he most definitely does not care about his job. "Is it the way I look? Is it intimidating?" "Because I get that a lot. But listen, Isaac, I think we're at the same level of, and oh Jesus, I have a boyfriend," Isaac interrupts, holding up both hands. Chris' eyebrows rise. "Oh?" "Yes," Isaac repeats through gritted teeth. He can't believe he's resorted back to his high school excuse when older men tried to hit on him. He's suddenly 17 again and way out of his comfort zone. "So, I don't know how you do it over there in Chrisland, but I'm not eager to become an adulterer." Chris studies him carefully. "What's the lucky guy's name?" Okay, Isaac can do this. He's about to yell out whatever name comes to mind, any name he can make up right here on the spot, any name. Just whatever name you want, brain. Any second now. A second longer and then it becomes obvious it's a lie, so if you'd like to hurry up, Evan, he blurts, and oh, Christ. Seriously? Chris's eyebrows rise. "Evan," he repeats slowly. "Is he hot?" Isaac's regretting everything ever. "Conventionally, yeah, does it matter?" Isaac scoffs. "I'm dating him and I'm not going to cheat on him just because you've got this obsession with sleeping with all of the employees in this place. And I don't know how you haven't contracted an STP at this point." "Isaac," Chris sounds scandalized, "I practice safe sex. I'm not an animal." Isaac stares at him in disbelief. "Leave. Oh my God." Chris nods and holds up his hands once again, surrendering. All right, he concedes, and Isaac can finally exhale a quick sigh of relief. "I can respect loyalty, I guess, to an extent, but you won't last forever." Chris starts walking backwards and points excusingly at Isaac. "Bring him over sometime. I'd love to meet the guy who tied you down, Isaac Walterschen." "Yeah, that's never going to happen." "Bye, Chris," he dismisses him, clenching his jaw. Chris turns around and Isaac watches his back as he reaches his section. Isaac's angry at himself and his traitorous mouth, or brain, or both. But he supposes it's logical to come up with Evan's name first, considering Isaac is sleeping with him, so it's not like he can lay the blame completely on his train of thought, and also, there's the fact that he's been thinking about him lately due to the incident, and the fact that he doesn't know when he's going to text him again, and the frustration that comes with the thought of not getting laid for another week, and Isaac hears Chris grunt in frustration. He turns to look and see Chris staring down at the stream dejectedly. "For the love of Christ," Isaac purses his lips, so maybe things were looking up anyway. Isaac finishes closing his section in the nick of time, and is relieved when he finally walks back to the front desk to clock out. He just wants to get home, feed Galileo, and spend a couple of hours fighting his consciousness for sleep. The usual. He's very excited. He spots Julian lingering at the entrance, and when Julian spots him back, he waves at Isaac enthusiastically. Isaac offers him a tired smile as he walks to the computer, pulling up the system and clocking himself out. Man, if he could only be as energetic as Julian after a shift, things would probably be a lot easier for Isaac in the aftermath. As it were, it's far too tiring, and Isaac really likes being tired and hungry and in a bad mood. But when he walks over to Julian after he finds his coat, he resolves not to be an asshole until he reaches the tram. "How was the shift?" Julian asks him as they walk out of the museum. Isaac sighs. "Uneventful," he lies. "Though someone peed in the stream again." Julian laughs. "Seriously?" "Seriously." "Was it your section again?" Isaac shakes his head and grins. "Julian, do you think I'd be this marvelously cool and collected if it'd been my section?" He shakes his head. "Nah, it was Chris." Julian snorts. "Oh, that's even better." "I know," Isaac agrees, and they both exchange a smile. The rest of the walk is pretty quiet, which Isaac appreciates. He's not really in the mood for small talk, and Julian seems to be lost in his own thoughts. So instead they walk in comfortable silence, the same way they work together on the main floor sometimes. Isaac's head is starting to hurt, just a little bit, and he wonders if he and Eva have any painkillers left at home when the text notification of his phone goes off inside his pocket. Frowning, he reaches inside to pull it out, then slides the conversation open when he sees the text is from Jonas. "Jonas, dude, your dad just called me." Isaac feels his spine go cold. His face flush hot. Why does that man insist on making Isaac's life a living hell? Why does he keep trying when it's so obvious Isaac is trying to move on, trying to make a life without him, the same way his father had obviously tried to make a life without Isaac? He doesn't care about him. He cares about him a little. He doesn't want to see him. But the little boy inside him wants to so badly. Isaac hates this, hates the constriction of his heart when this comes back, and he angrily types a reply to Jonas, hoping to convey that anger in a couple of words. "Isaac, did you hang up on the fucker?" It takes but a second for Jonas to reply. Jonas, "Yeah, of course." But it sounded like he really wanted to talk to you. Isaac scoffs. "Isaac, I don't care." "Thanks." Isaac locks his phone and ignores the notification going off again. Most likely a small text of acknowledgement from Jonas. He feels like his legs weigh 1,000 pounds now. The walk to the tram station seemingly endless, and he wants to forget about this. He hates that he feels this way, hates that his father still has so much control over him, and he thinks there's a way to get rid of this, to make this go away, but he refuses. He's not going to. Isaac doesn't think it's the appropriate time, and he thinks they need their space, and he's not going to be the one to fucking text first, so he's going to have to do what he used to do pre-Evan, scream into his pillow until he falls asleep. Isaac blinks over at Julian, who's looking at him both expectantly and worriedly. He shakes his head. "Wow, sorry, he clears his throat. "Sorry, what did you say?" Julian takes a deep breath. "I said that, there's this really nice bar on your tram route," he explains, "and, it's not too late, and if you don't have anything to do right now, we should maybe go have a drink." His offer is slow, his expression worry. Just to, wash off the day. Isaac keeps thinking about his father and how angry he is, and then he's thinking about the last time he got drunk. He looks over at Julian and smiles regretfully. "Hey, listen, I'm really tired, Julian, so I think I'm gonna head home, sleep it off instead." Julian licks his lips and nods understanding. "No, yeah, totally, I get it." Isaac feels like an asshole of multiple proportions anyway, because there Julian is trying to get to know Isaac as more than his co-worker, maybe even be friends the same way he's friends with the other boys, so Isaac smiles crookedly. "I'll take a rain check though, yeah?" Julian looks up at him in surprise, a small smile perking at his lips. "Yeah?" Isaac nods. "Yeah, we can invite the boys and everything," he suggests, and something in Julian's gaze falls. "Oh yeah," he nods. "Yeah, that sounds nice." "Good." Isaac reaches over to pat at Julian's back awkwardly, and then tries his best to forget about his father, and about Evan, and about everything, just until he reaches the tram station, just until Julian retreats and can't see the anger which will most likely keep through his veins, and just until he can look at his reflection in the window of the tram to remind himself just how fucking pathetic he looks, and how pathetic he is, for letting someone in his life break him over and over and over. There's a battle with the knob, because of course there is, but after Isaac's back promptly hits the wall, and he slams the door closed, he manages to kick off his shoes and throw his coat on the couch angrily, and stomp with purpose towards his room. On his way, however, he stomps by the kitchen, which Eva probably heard. She calls out his name in question, and then Isaac stops in his tracks and inhales. hoping she'll forget the question. At least for tonight, so he can stew in his own anger in peace. He turns back and makes his way over to the open door frame of the kitchen, and there, standing in confusion, is Ever, chocolate battered all over her face, and beside her, fucking Nora again. Like they both don't have anything better to do than spend time with each other. As if Nora doesn't have anything better to do than lead his best friend on, and Ever doesn't have anything better to do than to let her. Seriously, Ever, he snaps, and to Nora it might sound like he's annoyed at the fact that Ever called him over, but Ever knows what his words are about, his disbelief, his disappointment, an accusation, a blatant call-out. Knows what she's doing, Isaac's ass. She's purposely setting herself up for heartbreak and disappointment, and he wants to scream in her face suddenly, shake her shoulders and remind her about how awful it feels for someone to take your heart and stomp all over it, remind her how there's no one in this world that can't make you feel that way, even when you've built up your walls, even when you've decided you won't take anymore. Eva's going to get hurt again, the way Isaac's hurt right now, and he hates the thought. Nora and Eva exchange a glance, then Eva turns back to look at Isaac. Isaac, are you... Isaac shakes his head and scoffs in disbelief. I'm going to my room, he snaps. Do whatever you want. He turns and makes a beeline for his room, and he petulantly slams the door closed behind him. Isaac paces back and forth, forgetting for a moment all about feeding Galileo, or screaming into his pillow, or anything of the sort. He's debating whether or not he should just text Evan, forget about this entire situation for a little while, blow off some steam until this feels less than it actually is. But he knows now's not the time. He knows it's not. Isaac's aware that after the sex, he'd most likely break down. And that's not something he wants Evan to see. Not now, not ever. He marches over to his bed and sits at the edge of it, taking a deep, shaky breath, trying his best to steady it. The thoughts begin to race, and he's an idiot for letting them, he knows. His father started reaching out to the only friend he thinks Isaac's ever had. He's desperate to make amends, to make himself feel better, to show his new family that he can be a good father to a boy he ran out on when he needed him the most, that he can be a good person, even though he couldn't stand another moment of his mother's illness, couldn't even spare the time to take this only son with him, left him at 15 to brave his mother's episodes, to hear her cry herself to sleep at night, to deal with the repulsion and guilt when he found out he was gay, when he found out his mother might not love him anymore, much like his father, and... The tears fall on their own accord, but Isaac immediately wipes them away. His father doesn't deserve his tears. He never has. It's taken a long time for him to learn that. He's not willing to unlearn it today because of the smallest trigger. There's a quiet knock on his door, and Isaac composes himself enough to say, "Come in," without sounding like an asshole, and Eva pushes open the door carefully. "Hi," she greets him quietly. Instead of angry, she looks concerned. And that's not something Isaac deserves. He snapped at her when this clearly wasn't her fault, made a fool out of himself in front of Nora, all because he can't handle the mere mention of his father anywhere near him. Eva walks over to where he sits on the bed with a plate full of brownies. She sits down next to Isaac and holds the plate out for him. "Want one?" she asks. "I mean, don't get too excited, there's no wheat in them or anything, but I think we did a pretty good job." Isaac laughs quietly and shakes his head. "No thanks." Eva considers him for a moment longer, before setting the plate beside her on the bed. "Isaac," she starts quietly, "are you going to tell me what's wrong this time?" Isaac looks over at her and sees the sincerity in her eyes, along with the worry. Along with the frustration Isaac's sure she must feel at the fact that she can't seem to help him, that Isaac won't let her help him. He wants to do better. He wants to make it better. But he doesn't know how to. He doesn't know how to anymore. Isaac sniffs. "Maybe tomorrow," he lies. And Eva seems to know he is, but she doesn't push it. Instead, she reaches a hand over to lie on top of Isaac's. "You want to sleep in my room tonight?" she offers. "There's plenty of room in my bed, you know that." Isaac shakes his head. God, the fact that Eva can be so kind after... I'm sorry, he apologizes quietly. That was about back there, that was rude and uncalled for, and I'm sorry. Eva shrugs her shoulder. It is what it is. Isaac licks his lips shamefully, looks down at his lap. "Will you tell Nora I'm sorry too?" he asks quietly. "I didn't mean... I don't want you to think she's not welcome or anything. I'm just..." Isaac stops himself there, afraid of giving away too much afterwards. But Eva seems to understand anyway. "Take care of yourself first," she tells him softly. I'm always scared that you forget to do that. And then you end up taking care of everyone else, and then you end up here. She squeezes his hand. And I don't like seeing you here. Isaac looks at her. And God, she suddenly looks so lovely, like the best person in Isaac's life. He wishes he could say that, could articulate it correctly. Wishes for a second he was brave enough. But there's a knot in his throat that won't allow it. And so he nods his head instead. Okay. Eva nods, though she doesn't exactly look like she believes him. Okay, she agrees, reaching back to grab the plate of brownies. If you change your mind, we'll be in the kitchen for a little while longer, she tells him. And if you need anything, Isaac nods. I know. He smiles softly up at her. I don't deserve your kindness, you know. Eva raises an eyebrow. Maybe, she shrugs, but sometimes I don't think I deserve yours either. Before Isaac can tell her that's absurd, she's quietly making her way out of his room, closing the door behind her with an almost soundless click. Isaac stares at his hands and tries to gather his wits about him. He's okay, he tells himself. He has people in his life, people that know him and people who don't, people who won't know. Isaac can't say the words yet, can't even think them. There's so much wrong with you, he tells himself. There's so much wrong with you. His phone goes off in his pocket again, and he wipes at his nose uselessly before he reaches inside to pull it out. He looks down at the screen and freezes when he sees Evan's contact chime back at him. He's probably alone at the house, looking for Isaac to come over, and for the first time, Isaac is going to refuse. Isaac sniffs uselessly as he unlocks the conversation, readying his thumbs to write the words, "Can't tonight," when he realizes it's not a text message at all. Evan, image attachment. Isaac stares at it in wonder, then in confusion, and finally he laughs once, disbelieving. It's a stupid picture. It's a stupid meme. It's ridiculous, and so is Evan, and he shouldn't be doing this. It's against the rules. Isaac can call him out right now and can tell him he's close enough to ending this for good. But it's surprising, and maybe it's a way to break the ice after the incident, and it might be exactly what Isaac needs right now. Licking his lips, he types and retypes his reply, until he finally settles on one. Isaac. 2010 called and wants its memes back. It only takes Evan a couple of seconds to respond. Isaac paying close attention to the typing bubble. Evan, the 90s called, they want their insults back. The bubble appears again, bringing another message in its wake. Evan. Besides, those are some fighting words for a guy who's got a Spider-Man meme as his Facebook profile picture. Isaac scoffs. Isaac, at least its face is nice to look at. Though I suppose that meme is an accurate representation. Their faces are just as ugly as yours. There's a moment in which the bubble doesn't appear at all, and there's something in Isaac that panics for a second. He's not sure if he's taken it too far, if maybe it was meant to last only a couple of messages. If Evans realized what Isaac had realized before, that this is not something they should be doing, not if the rules hidden somewhere in Evan's closet and folded neatly in Isaac's underwear drawer have anything to say about it. He's about to lock his phone and throw it across the room when the bubble appears again. Isaac holds his breath the entire time. Evan, that's funny because that's exactly the face you make when you come. Isaac stares down at the message for a moment, then barks out a surprised laugh. Isaac, asshole. Isaac puts his phone down and takes a deep breath. He's okay, he tells himself. He's okay. He's going to be okay, and even if he knows he's lying, he's doing a pretty good job at convincing himself. At least long enough to fall back on the mattress and let sleep take him under.